Good evening. Tonight, Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki wins certificate forgery suit filed against him by the All Progressives Congress. Court says APC has no evidence to back up allegation. Police raid various nightclubs in Lagos, arrest 237 violators of COVID-19 protocols. Major opposition parties in Anambra strategize to unseat the ruling party from the government house ahead of the state governorship election later in the year. And the Boeing 737 passenger plane with 62 people on board feared to have crashed into the sea after takeoff from Indonesia's capital, Jakarta. Plus, you'll see business and sports.
On business news tonight, Nigeria's crude export revenue gets a potential boost as international oil price benchmark Brent crude hits $55 per barrel.
And on sports news tonight, Bulgaria's Kubrat Pulev wants a rematch with unified champion Anthony Joshua after his agent claims he was hampered by coronavirus during the last fight.
It's another hurdle crossed for the governor of Edo State, Mr. Godwin Obaseki, as the Federal High Court in Abuja has dismissed the certificate forgery suit filed against him by the All Progressives Congress and one of its chieftains, Mr. Williams Edobo, in a judgment delivered by Justice Ahmed Mohammed. The court held that the plaintiffs failed to discharge the burden of proof placed on them by the law by way of credible evidence. Justice Mohammed held that there was no iota of truth before the court to establish that Governor Obaseki forged either his ordinary school-level certificate or the degree certificate awarded to him in 1979 by the University of Ibadan.
The hopes of the All Progressives Congress, the APC, to sack Mr. Godwin Obaseki as the governor of Edo State has been dashed as the Federal High Court in Abuja dismissed a suit predicated on alleged certificate forgery. The court held that the allegation of forgery the plaintiffs leveled against Governor Obaseki bordered on crime and therefore required to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. Justice Mohammed insists that none of the witnesses called by the plaintiffs was able to prove that the certificate was forged. The witnesses further admitted that none of them visited the University of Ibadan to confirm the authenticity or otherwise of the certificate in question. The court further held that the plaintiffs only relied on photocopies that were attached to the Form EC9 Governor Obaseki submitted to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC). Lawyers to Governor Obaseki and the People's Democratic Party applaud the verdict of the court.
The judgment, not unexpected. We always had the confidence that the fact and the law was on our side, but then we needed to go through with the trial process. And luckily, the judge dispassionately considered the cases presented and came out, in my view, and in our view, on what was the right decision. So we are quite happy and elated, and we hope that this will put to rest this issue of certificate saga that is resuscitated every electoral cycle. Because it's been on 2016, they did the same thing. Anytime Obaseki raises his head to contest an election, they raise up the issue of certificate scandal. So now it's been put to rest, and we hope that everybody will allow the man.
If I recall liking it to a situation where a stranger is claiming that somebody is not the father of a child, and the man says, it's my son. More so, as the university has come and said, we issue the certificate. And all originals were tendered. And the court therefore held that the case has not been proved at all, talk less of proved beyond reasonable doubt. The case has been dismissed. And we are happy and we are grateful to Almighty God because this is a victory for the rule of law. Everything has been put to rest.
With the court's position that the apparent discrepancies in the documents Governor Obaseki submitted to INEC were satisfactorily explained, the All Progressives Congress may be heading to the Court of Appeal as none of their counsel was available for comments.
Meanwhile, Governor Godwin Obaseki has hailed the ruling of the Federal High Court, Abuja, on the certificate forgery suit brought against him by the APC. In a statement, the governor said the verdict is a triumph of the rule of law and a testament to the fact that truth will prevail ultimately, no matter how vehemently detractors push lies in the face of incontrovertible evidence. According to the governor, the verdict of the Federal High Court delivered by Honorable Justice Ahmed Mohammed is well received and a victory for the rule of law. It was a most needless attempt by desperate individuals trying to undo the will of the people through the back door, but we are happy today that justice and truth have prevailed. He notes that the verdict confirms once again that Edo people were well guided in trusting him to lead them in the September 19th governorship election, promising to continue to prioritize development of the state. The dance of victory by the Deputy Governor of Edo State, Philip Shaibu, and other officials of the state government following the court judgment dismissing the certificate forgery suit against Governor Obaseki. The deputy says the judiciary has lived up to its expectations, adding that the court ruling is in favor of the fight against godfatherism in the state. On the remaining cases in court, Mr. Shaibu says he believes that this judgment is a clear indication that the PDP will win all of them.
For us in Edo State, we are excited that the judiciary has rubber stamped the verdict of Edo people. And for us, it's not just about Edo now. It's about judiciary living up to its name. And we really thank the judiciary for what they have done today. And they have given us hope that we can approach the judiciary and get justice. Justice is not just for the governor of Edo State or the deputy governor. Justice is for Edo and Nigeria and the entire world, that attention was in Edo during the election. For us, we are excited. We are happy. We are happy that light has overcome darkness. And darkness will never come surface in Edo again. The end of godfatherism has been re-established by the verdict of today. And I can tell you, development is all over Edo and it will continue. Because when the godfather are put where they belong, and the judiciary has also helped us to place them where they belong, definitely it's going to be development. I am excited and happy today.
The Lagos State Judicial Panel on Restitution for Victims of SARS and other related matters today listened to the testimony of 2 petitioners out of 6 petitions it listed for hearing. In one of the petitions, a driver, Francis Osajowe, narrated how he landed at the police station August 15, 2020, after he allegedly bought a stolen car. He said without conducting any investigation, he was beaten, tortured, suffered a broken hand, was paraded as a criminal, and then illegally detained.
On the 15th of August 2020, at about 4 p.m., 4:30, I was arrested and taken to Olosun police station in respect of the car I bought from Mr. Afiz Ashogba. CSP Aroba Phillips now came, and when he came, he asked me how I bought the car, how did I buy it, and I told him I purchased it for, I bought it from one Mr. Afiz Ashogba. After that, he asked Mr. Taiwo to handcuff me and that I should produce the gun I used in robbing the occupant and in snatching the car. And I told him I bought the car and I have evidences to prove. Not minding that fact, he said they should handcuff me and he started beating me. He brought out a baton. Mr. Taiwo gave him a baton and a handcuff. So he handcuffed me and Mr. Benga Sampson, my mechanic, and started beating me. He beat me to the extent that I couldn't move, my bone dislocated. And I told him, sir, with all due respect, I bought this car, I can take you to where I bought it. At least you should investigate before. He said that blood must come out from my body before he stops. And after beating me for like 30 minutes, he said they should throw me into the cell, myself and Mr. Benga. I was detained. Investigation started. By Wednesday, the 17th, I was bailed after my family paid the sum of 255,000. Cash. After my release from SARS detention, I had to go and seek for medical attention, the local people to treat my hand. And my brother called me from abroad, the US, to tell me he saw a publication on the internet as regards me having a case and portraying me as a criminal and as a hoodlum. And I told him, how did he get the story? He said it's on the internet. I should check Google Chrome, put in my family name, and I'll see the story.
In another petition, an officer with the Nigerian Agricultural Quarantine Services, Mr. Tella Adesoya, narrated how he was illegally detained by the police when two men alleged that he was a hit-and-run driver after a random stop and search by a police officer.
That was the day I got to know woman superintendent Helen Otitoju. Helen Otitoju was the divisional traffic officer at Iba. When I was detained at Igodo called Iba. So Iba informed the DTO that something happened. The instruction that brought me to Iba, the instruction that said I should go straight to the cell was from Helen Otitoju. So she now called me and said, I said, madam, I won't write anything. Take me to court. I think an hour later, the DPO himself now arrived. Chief Superintendent, yes, CSP, Olusha Kingbenga. So they now marched me to the DPO. He now said, what happened? And I told the DPO, so thing. That the only thing that stopped me at Gondo was a check. If not for a police check, what I do? So after that explanation, the DPO said, I want to detain him. You people don't have sufficient evidence to tell me to detain him. Go and look at the car. DPO went out, went through, walked through my car. There is no single dent on my car. So when the DPO talked, he insisted he won't sign my detention notice until he is convinced that I'm the one that knocked somebody down. From the DPO's office, the DTO took me to the cell again. After about 30 minutes, they came and bring me back, and they brought two boys, two men. Myself, the two men, the DTO now went to the DPO again. The DTO now presents those boys. When I say DTO, I mean Helen Otutoju. Helen Otutoju now presented those two boys to the DPO, Olusegun, as those that witnessed the incident when it happened. When I was accosted in the morning at Igondo by two men, those two men that came in the morning differs from the two men that came in the evening. They described my car, described it as at the time they were describing my car was already at Iba police station. I don't know how they got to convince the DPO, Olusegun, CSP Olusegun. I was detained. So when the DPO said, well, there's nothing he can do. You are the only one in your car. No one can be a witness and this and that. So that day, I was forced to put up a statement.
The chairman of the panel, Justice Doris Okwobi, adjourned his petition till the 20th of January. In part two, after the break, we shift focus to aviation in our review of sectoral performance in 2020. Do join us again. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the News at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki wins certificate forgery suit filed against him by the All Progressives Congress. Court says APC has no evidence to back up allegation. Police raid various nightclubs in Lagos State, arrest 237 violators of COVID-19 protocols. Major opposition parties in Anambra State strategized to unseat ruling party from the government house ahead of the state governorship election later in the year. And a Boeing 737 passenger plane with 62 people on board feared to have crashed into the sea after takeoff from Indonesia's capital, Jakarta. Aviation appeared to have faced a grim future as COVID-19 ravaged the sector in 2020, with aircraft remaining on the ground for more than 4 months, leading to a massive loss of passenger revenue. While the year 2021 promises to see a small lift, returning to pre-pandemic profits may just be a long haul. Our aviation correspondent Bukola Jokitumbi takes a look at the sector in our review of 2020.
In 2020, the aviation sector found itself in the firing line of a potentially devastating financial crisis. Unprecedented travel restrictions for almost 6 months forced aviation operations to a halt as both the tourism sector and business travel felt the full impact of a global lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. While the disruptions to aviation are continuing slightly in some countries, like Britain currently under another lockdown, the International Air Transport Association estimated airline losses to be about $118.5 billion, deeper than the $84.3 billion forecast in June.
The traffic should be, at the end of 2021, half of what it was in 2019. So it's better that what it is in 2020, it should be in 2020 around 1/3 of what it was in 2019. but it is still a very, dark picture.
Here in Nigeria, the nation closed its international borders from the 23rd of March, permitting only evacuation flights to land in the country. In the midst of the crisis, domestic carrier Air Peace charted new waters as it evacuated different nationals to China, Israel, and India. Local terminals were closed a week earlier and resumed early July, with passengers welcoming the new normal of face masks, hand sanitizing, and social distance markings in line with COVID-19 protocols in order to curb the spread of the virus. Prior to the crisis, aviation contributed over 198 billion naira in 2019 to Nigeria's GDP and supported over 200,000 jobs. IATA estimates that the COVID-19 crisis puts 125,000 jobs at risk.
If I were still running aircraft, I will seriously reduce operations to the barest minimum, and any flight that does not deliver a load factor that will break even will be cancelled.
Owing to the financial crisis that hit airlines, the global airline body announced in December the government had helped airlines survive the crisis with about $173 billion in various forms of financial support. Here in Nigeria, the federal government approved and released a 4 billion naira palliative to airlines and another 1 billion naira to ancillary sectors to cushion the effect of the coronavirus pandemic. But operators say they want more than just funds.
We've been enjoying this zero duty on importation of aircraft and zero VAT on importation of aircraft and aircraft spares for the past 6 years. All of a sudden, custom turned around and introduced a regime unknown to us.
On a sad note, a helicopter accident in the Okpebbi area of Lagos in August 2020 left 3 people dead. The losses are also huge on the global front, with notable airline collapse, among them a Britain's Flybe which collapsed on March 5 after a plunge in travel demand, making the long-struggling regional airline one of the first big corporate casualties. Aviation Holdings, Latin America's second-largest airline, filed for bankruptcy protection in May. Virgin Australia also went under. Job losses were also a big deal as British Airways, Brussels Airlines, Germany's Lufthansa, and Emirates, one of the world's biggest long-haul airlines, laid off hundreds of pilots and thousands of cabin crew.
It's a very worrying time for everybody, but I think the figures speak for themselves. This is the deepest crisis. This is by far the biggest loss. British Airways will lose, or has lost more in 1 quarter than the record loss it made in a year in history.
On the whole, airline financial performance is expected to see a significant turn for the better in 2021. Bukola Joe Oketumbi, Channels Television News.
And the voice you just heard in that report, our aviation correspondent Bukola Joe Oketumbi joins us on the news tonight. Good to have you, Bukola.
Hello, Millicent.
So, aviation tourism industry, we're one of the hardest hit due to especially the total lockdown, the shutdown of the airspace, as you mentioned in that report, and not just in Nigeria, also around the world. But how would you describe what the airline operators went through with that in 2020 in Nigeria?
I would say that the airlines really suffered a lot of losses. Because first of all, when the pandemic happened, it came with a lot of the airlines telling staff to proceed on unpaid leave. So many of those staff did not have salary for about 4 months. That's simply because airlines are not flying, there's no revenue from passengers. And it's not just the airlines. Whatever happens to the airlines happens to the allied sector. So you talk of the airports suffered. You talk of catering suffered, fueling and all of that. Because basically, it's the airlines that give life to all of the other supporting structure around it. And from my report, you'd hear IATA saying that on the global front, we lost $118 billion. In Nigeria, the minister at that time was quoted to have said that we're losing 20 billion naira per month. So if you look at 20 billion naira per month, across 8 airlines. That would translate to about 160 billion naira for 4 months. That's really huge. And once that is eroded, what do you expect of the airlines? Now that they're even back, things are not the same.
So we're looking at perhaps old issues in the aviation sector exacerbated due to COVID-19 in 2020.
Basically, I would say that our airlines have always had their issues before now. That's simply because airlines say that, airline operators say that airlines in Nigeria are overtaxed. There's landing fee, there's parking fee, there's just a lot of fees that you have to pay. And that when they get the ticket money in the first place, they have to share it with some of the agencies. For example, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority takes 5% out of that ticket revenue that you see. And so when airlines pass that on, they still have a lot of costs to battle with. And now coming back into COVID, it's not the easiest of times for them.
So looking at, a lot of people out of job, we understand that even with we're in 2021, there's also that risk of cutting costs for some of the airline, the operators. What do you see happening? What do you think?
That's simply because, because the pandemic is still persisting, passenger figures are still low. Of course, we saw a surge during the festivity period. But right now, if you go to the airport, who are those traveling? Basically government workers or businessmen who have something to do. And if you listen to my report, the president of the Aviation Roundtable said that business class seats are already gone. That basically all airlines should turn their aircraft into something like an economy aircraft, because that's where you're going to get the money at this time. And for job losses, I foresee some more still happening, because if an airline is there and they're not making revenue, there's no need taking on the staff that you will not be able to pay.
All right. Bukola Joke to be our aviation correspondent. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Millicent.
Well, we still have more on our sectoral review of the aviation sector. We have a aviation consultant, join us for more on that a little later on. But let's switch to politics now. And this is with about 10 months before the governorship election in Anambra State. The leaders of major political parties have started strategizing on how to win the hearts of the people and occupy the government seat come November. Recently, the All Progressives Congress and the People's Democratic Party, the two major opposition, have started meetings to strengthen their structure with the target to win come November.
The arrival of the Minister of Labour and Employment, the leader of the All Progressives Congress in Anambra State, Dr. Chris Ngige, signals the commencement of a strategic meeting which has the November governorship election as its focus.
My leaders.
The discussion is on the game plan and steps needed, and has attracted members of the party in the state.
Since I started party politics, the crop of state working committee members we have now are one of the best.
By the time we are done with this current registration we want to embark on, it will be very obvious to everybody that APC is taking over the leadership of the state.
In another location in Oka, the state capital, members of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, gather for a similar purpose. They lay bare the challenges and possible solutions as they aim at gaining control of the government house.
If you have a strong candidate and you don't have a strong party, that candidate will not be able to be elected. But if you have a strong candidate and you have a strong party, then the party and the candidate will be able to be elected.
Go to the field and look for those who are looking to support us. Go to the field and work with the people. The women, go mobilize women in the market. Go on the banner. We will all go out in the field.
As the political landscape in the state gets more active, the ruling party, the All Progressives Grand Alliance, may also be strategizing to retain its position.
Now back to our sectoral review of the aviation sector. Joining us right now in the studio on the news at 10 is an aviation consultant, Mr. Tayo Ujuri. Glad to have you join us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, give us your own perspective on the impact and consequences of COVID-19 on the aviation sector in 2020.
Well, like everybody has said earlier, it's a mitigated, disastrous year for aviation. And with that, I haven't seen that. We've never seen this kind of shock to aviation since World War II. We've gone through 9/11, we've gone through SARS, we've gone through economic recession. It's never been. We've been able to bounce back within a quarter or 2 quarters after those shock. But what we've seen now is we came back and there were some incidental improvements with passenger traffic, like December, a bit of movement. But what we've really seen now is lots of loss, because let's bring that back to Nigeria, where we had the closure for about 4 months. After the reopening, we saw NSAS protests, which actually disrupted lots of travel from the center of economic commerce, which is Lagos. That really affected passenger travel. Forex actually went up, which actually affects 80% of operational costs for all domestic airlines is domiciled in Forex. So they were unable to buy Forex at competitive rates for them to meet their costs. That's why the price of tickets actually went higher than normal in the last quarter of 2020. So these are all challenges, but looking into 2021, is that going to get better? We do not see that happening.
Some people wonder if the decisions we took in 2020 could have helped us avert a lot of the losses that we suffered. What do you think?
I doubt that, because it was a global impact. It was a pandemic, and everywhere was shut down. What really made it really disastrous, and the negative impact that we've seen over and is still affecting us, is that we had lots of protocols by countries across board having their individual country protocols rather than having a layered approach, which ICAO and IATA has actually proposed. With the layered approach, it actually helps passengers travel and have one source of truth. In sense that, for example, you look at Canada, for example, has the COVID test screening as well as 14 days isolation period. If you're going, that does not augur well for leisure or business travel, and that's actually going to let the travel numbers dissipate within this year.
So how long do you think recovery would take moving into 2021? Because we're still looking at travel still being really low, and then perhaps difficulty also that they're facing in the operating capacities.
Looking at IATA numbers are looking at projecting and forecasting for about 2022. But looking at Nigeria, there are lots of underground economic drivers. We're technically in a recession. For us, aviation is a function of disposable income as well as government spending. This is not going to happen in Nigeria till second, third quarter. With this in place, people are not going to spend. There are not lots of trainings, there are not lots of movement until third quarter, which is where we'll now see movement, which will be about 50% of 2020 numbers, not the pre-COVID-19 numbers. So which is still very minuscule in terms of numbers.
Well, when you compare it to perhaps the COVID palliative, you look at the loans that they perhaps have access to, the budget in 2021 acting as a buffer, aren't you optimistic?
Well, we've seen second strain, and second strain is still in the air. Lots of movement. We can actually put a finger on the needle at this point. The fact that the vaccine has come, but the vaccine is not a relief. Is not even with the vaccine, we still have an increase in the rate of COVID-19 deaths and the spread. So with that, that's actually going to affect the number of people traveling and the awareness. Even though we have travel bubbles being set up, that's still, people are not enthused about traveling at this point. So that's going to affect, even though there's a budget for it, there's a spending for it, the people are still not gravitating towards air travel.
Even with the threat of a second wave, what do you think will happen?
With the threat of a second wave, we're going to see low numbers, because there are lots of drivers with that. People are comfortable with meetings online and using technology for lots of transactions. So we're not going to see lots of what you call visiting families and friends travel. Business travel is not going to come back soon. So that's going to actually affect numbers till third quarter. That's all the drivers that would affect aviation travel.
So still a rough and bumpy ride. We'd like to thank you so much, aviation consultant, Mr. Tayo Juri. Thank you for joining us.
It's always
on
a
the News at
pleasure.
10. The police in Lagos have vowed to go tough on violators of COVID-19 protocols in the state. This follows the arrest of a total of 237 people during a raid of some nightclubs in the city, led by the Commissioner of Police. 85 of the suspects were said to have been apprehended at Lounge 38 in Bode Thomas Street, Surulere, and 152 at Club Victoria in Victoria Island. 6 people were also apprehended for allegedly violating the midnight to 4 a.m. curfew in the state.
A bad day for these nightclubbers who have defied all COVID-19 protocols on social gatherings and operation of nightclubs.
COVID-19, no clubbing. You must enjoy the essence of your own life. We won't allow you.
They are rounded up by police officers in Lagos, led by the Commissioner, Hakeem Odumosu, in the early hours of Saturday. The suspects are left in shock as they are led out of the clubs at Lounge 38 in Bode Thomas, Victoria, and Columbia Club in Victoria Island of Lagos.
Single file.
Some of those arrested also showed their grievance before being driven away. While being paraded at the police headquarters in Ikeja, the police commissioner explains that this is just the beginning.
The club owners are hereby strictly warned, and I repeat, strictly warned, to comply with state government directive that all clubs must close immediately. All clubs, no exception. And the owners of the clubs now will be fished out, will be prosecuted too, because we know that if there is no seller, there won't be buyer. Somebody must provide something for somebody to buy. And if you approach the wall now, we recommend the revocation of the sale of that property to the state government.
The suspects were later charged before the Lagos State Mobile Court and fined accordingly.
Concerned private sector organizations are stepping up efforts in their collaboration with the government to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. One of them is the Reddington Hospital, which has opened its new Armored Shield Isolation Center in Victoria Island for coronavirus patients, equipped with level 3 ICU capability for COVID-19 treatment. While inaugurating the facility, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu says such private sector partnership should bring an end to the second wave.
Nigeria now records more than twice the number of cases over a 24-hour period compared to the first wave of COVID-19. Lagos, with more than 35% of the burden, is the epicenter of the outbreak, and so it's small wonder that the governor welcomes private sector involvement and is present to commission the new Armored Shield Isolation Center built by Reddington Hospital.
The center we are commissioning today complements our pre-existing center in Ikeja, for which demand, unfortunately, has significantly outstripped supply. We have certainly felt the impact of the second wave of COVID-19, and it has become clear that we needed to respond in some way to supplement the current capacity in Lagos State.
The Lagos State government says it's also working to bring the situation under control.
We are opening other
isolation facilities that were decommissioned. Today, we are launching and activating an oxygen plant in collaboration with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation at the Yaba facility so that we can generate the so much needed oxygen that our patients are in, that is in such demand now.
His Excellency Babajide Sanwo-Olu.
For the governor of Lagos State, even though the private and public sectors are doing much to stay ahead of the virus, we can only win this battle by also preventing infection.
We really did not know that even the second wave will be stronger than the first wave. So before the end of the month, we're also commissioning another oxygen plant. Let's use occasions like this to spread the news that all of the non-pharmaceutical protocols that have been set, please, people need to comply with them. It's really, really so critical and so essential. Okay. All sorts behind us. Thank you very much.
The isolation center is a 20-bed institution at Victoria Island, equipped with state-of-the-art ICU facilities from levels 1 through 3. Level 3 being the most critical cases which need oxygen. Oxygen is supplied by these pipes coming through the wall. At the command center, patients can be monitored and get prompt attention if their condition deteriorates. And for the first time, a meeting area where relatives can interact with their sick loved ones without contact to minimize the psychosocial trauma that results from separation. With all these in place, Reddington Hospital looks set to pull its weight in the ongoing fight against COVID-19. Mary Alale Yusuf, Channels Television News.
Staying with COVID-19, infections in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, have continued to rise, especially in the last 3 weeks. It is now among the major centers driving the high national case tally, which has increased exponentially since the middle of December last year. Our next report examines the lifestyle of the residents of the FCT, especially with regard to their level of compliance to the COVID-19 safety protocols.
2 weeks ago, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 officially announced the second wave of the virus in Nigeria, owing to the resurgence of new infections across the country. Lagos, Plateau, FCT, Oyo, Kaduna, Nasarawa and Rivers States are now some of the major contributors to the national daily new infections of COVID-19, which stood at 1,544 as at Friday, January the 8th. Although the task force has commended these states and the FCT for upscaling testing, which it says is one of the reasons why several cases are now being detected, the lifestyle of people in the nation's capital is obviously contributing to the rise in the number of new infections. From the motor parks to the markets and other public places in the FCT, majority do not care about the non-pharmaceutical interventions. For many, the use of face masks and physical distancing is alien. Taxi drivers do not adhere to the restrictions on the number of passengers allowed to be carried at a time.
We in this country, we are the user and the kill ourselves. And this way it's could do so is good for us because it will help us. But tell about another year. You see a person carry two for back, carry one for front, you go complain for you, say you go buy fuel for 1,000 naira. How much are you going to get? Fuel money go come out. Okay, carry three for back, one for front. Still, they don't agree. So we allow them. We say we go down, you talk to fight. It go to another riot. So that's why we leave them.
If they tell the passenger that they should pay more than what they are collecting before, the passenger too will not accept it. For that, there is no possibility that driver too will accept to take two people at the back. That is just the problem there.
Majority of residents who go about their daily activities have also come to view the face masks only as an entry permit to some offices.
Like yesterday I was in Garaki, I have no option. I was in Garaki Hospital yesterday, I have no option than to wear it. If I'm going to a place where it's very crowded, steady, my face mask is always on my bag. If I'm in, like, assuming I'm going inside this market now, I'll put on my face mask. If I should enter this cab now, I'll put on my face mask.
we spoke to the head of the FCT COVID-19 task force about enforcing the safety protocols.
To our utmost shock, some still just want to live in disbelief. And sometimes as well, if you observe the issue of the non-pharmaceutical materials here, the face mask, physical distancing, washing of hands, some people will just go around the street and see people, everyone having face masks, few putting their own on, some having theirs in their pocket. Once they start the task force, within split second, you will find everyone with face masks, and you'll be so shocked that I think the ones I saw 2 seconds ago without face masks, they saw task force, everyone will just put face masks on. Some people will just put it on to enter their offices, enter the banks, enter the churches, enter anywhere they want to enter. And once they get in there, either they remove the face mask or they drag it down to their jaw. And that we consider very inappropriate.
Nigeria's COVID-19 test positivity rate rose to 9.6%, with a case fatality rate hitting 3%, a scary statistics that requires the commitment of every citizen to change.
Away from the pandemic to River State, where the Governor Nyesom Wike has concluded the first phase of project commissioning for this year with the inauguration of the reconstructed Boni Bile Nembe jetty in the old Port Harcourt Township area of the state. The jetty, which is remodeled to meet modern water transportation and cargo movements, was commissioned by the Sokoto State Governor Aminu Tambuwal. Speaking during the event, Governor Wike said the opposition in River State has been silenced by his achievements.
It's a common saying that a city or nation that aims to grow its economy must invest in the right infrastructure, which includes an effective transport system. This, the River State government says, is its focus as it tries to integrate land and water transportation network in the state. Governor Nyesom Wike, who has been commissioning road projects across the state in recent times, is accompanied by the Sokoto State Governor Aminu Tambuwal to commission a jetty in Port Harcourt to serve travellers to and from Boni Island and Bile community in River State, as well as Nimbe in Bayelsa State. Despite the huge difference from what the jetty used to be, Governor Wike is still not happy with what's on the ground.
I nearly sacked the Commissioner of Transport yesterday. I nearly sacked him. And within 1 week, he must do what I want to say, then I will sack him. I've never seen people who design a project, no air condition, no fan, no furniture. I cannot accept it. It shows people who do not understand that people must live in a conducive environment and do business.
He also has a message for those who may want to use the jetty for criminal purposes.
The only party Nigeria has hope is People Democratic Party. But we will not allow any atom of criminality. Nothing like our boys. We don't get boys. Nothing like that. Nothing. PDP boys are those who want Nigeria to progress. We don't support banditry. We don't support any act of insurgency.
It is my honor and privilege.
The Sokoto State Governor then commissions the facility.
Under the able leadership of my brother and friend, Governor Nyesom Wike, CON, to the glory of God.
The reconstruction of the jetty located near the Creek Road Market, the biggest seafood market in River State, will not only sustain the old tradition of water transportation by the riverine people, but also improve trade activities in the area.
And there is hope for Nigeria's crude export revenue, and Teniola Shibowale has the rest of that story on Business News.
Welcome, Millicent. Well, there is hope indeed, because Nigeria's crude export revenue has gotten a potential boost as international oil price benchmark Brent crude closed the week higher at $55 per barrel. The price rally is higher by $15 against the $40 per barrel benchmark set for the country's 2021 budget, with a production level of 1.86 million barrels per day. Meanwhile, analysts expect oil prices to sustain the uptrend into February, as Saudi Arabia has pledged an additional 1 million barrels per day output cut between next month and March as part of a deal with its OPEC allies following the outcome of their meeting earlier in the week. However, there are concerns there could be a price correction later in the year if the price rallies are not supported by stronger demand. Barely 20 hours after achieving a new national all-time peak transmission of 5,552.80 megawatts of electricity, the Transmission Company of Nigeria says it has recorded yet another milestone. A statement from the TCN explains that the latest feat of 5,584.40 megawatts, which was reached on Thursday, January the 7th at 9:15 p.m. local time, surpasses the previous level by 31.60 megawatts. Meanwhile, the TCN says it will continue to ensure the efficient transmission of electricity generated from the national grid. After starting off the first trading day of 2021 with strong performance, the stock market ended the first trading week of January in the red, down by 0.37%. This comes after profit taken in 2 trading sessions outweighed the increase recorded in 3 sessions this week, despite a significantly positive performance on the sectoral activity chart. The negative close on the market's key indicators is attributed to the heavy drop on Dangote's share price, and the impact was mostly felt by the industrial goods counter, which fell by 2.29%. The share price of Japan Gold is the best performer out of 50 gainers for the week, with a 56.45% increase. The capital is worst among 21 losers, as it dropped by 12%. Meanwhile, the trio of champion breweries, Transcorp and Axis Bank, are the top 3 contributors to a total of 3.39 billion shares traded within the week. And that's business news tonight. I'm Teniola Shoboale. It's back to you, Millicent.
Thank you, Teniola. Let's bring you some sports news now. Here's Kayode Alayade.
Thank you, Millicent. Welcome to Sports News. Nigeria's hope of qualifying for the next round of the WAFU Under-17 Championship suffered a huge blow today after the Golden Eaglets played a 1-1 draw with Ghana at the Stade Municipal in Lomé, capital of Togo. Coach Fatai Amao's boys took the lead after Joseph Arumala scored from the penalty spot in the 77th minute and were almost closing out the game before Ghana got the equalizer from a penalty in the dying moments of the game. As it stands, Côte d'Ivoire must beat Ghana with a 2-goal margin for Nigeria to stand a chance of qualifying. And in the FA Cup, Everton needed an extra-time winner from Abdoulaye Doucouré to finally see off Championship side Rotherham to reach the 4th round with a 2-1 victory. Elsewhere, Leicester City beat Stoke City 4-1 at the Bet365 Stadium to advance in a game that featured 3 Nigerians, Wilfred Ndidi and Kelechi Iheanacho, represented the Foxes, while former Super Eagles captain Mikel Obi played for the Potters. Sheffield United won for the first time in 6 months by coming out on top in a 5-goal thriller at Bristol Rovers, which ended 3-2 in their favour. In other matches, 2 extra-time goals against QPR sent a much-changed Fulham into the 4th round of the competition, while Bournemouth beat Oldham Athletic 4-1. Norwich City beat Coventry 2-0, while Nottingham Forest squeezed past Cardiff City 1-0 to advance. And Arsenal also beat Newcastle United 2-0 in their own encounter. And that'll be all on sports news. Back to you, Melissa.
Carried to the international scene. A Boeing 737 passenger plane carrying 62 people is believed to have crashed into the sea shortly after takeoff from Indonesia's capital, Jakarta. Officials say the Sriwijaya flight was delayed by an hour due to poor weather conditions and heavy rain. It lost contact with air traffic control 4 minutes into its journey. Search and rescue efforts are underway.
The Sriwijaya airplane took off at about 2:30 p.m. Western Indonesian time from Jakarta and then disappeared off radar screens 4 minutes later. Flight tracking website flightradar24.com shows the aircraft lost more than 10,000 feet in altitude in less than a minute after takeoff. Indonesia's Navy says it's found the coordinates of the plane and has dispatched search and rescue vessels. Witnesses say they had seen and heard at least one explosion, and officials say suspected debris has been found. The plane was carrying 50 passengers, 43 adults and 7 children, as well as 12 crew members. Families await news of their loved ones at the airport where the plane was supposed to land. Yaman Zai is one of the waiting relatives. He says he was supposed to pick his wife and 3 daughters up. The plane is a Boeing 737-500 model, which is 27 years old, much older than the troubled 737 MAX model. It was a 73 MAX that crashed off Jakarta 2 years ago, killing 189 people. But the 500 model is widely flown and does not have the system implicated in the MAX's safety crisis. And officials say the Sriwijaya airplane was in good condition.
And the main news again. It was sweet victory for the Edo State Governor, Godwin Obaseki, today as the Federal High Court in Abuja dismissed the certificate forgery suit filed against him by the All Progressives Congress. The court held that the APC had no evidence to back up its allegation. That's News at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good night.